warming periods or comparable. So those two things sort of fueled the initial fear that are we sliding into another ice age? If this trend keeps going for decades, how long will it be before we're back into the little ice age? If that trend had kept going between the 40s and the 70s, yeah, we'd be in a little ice age right now. So then that raises an interesting question. What climatic factors caused the warming that began pretty much in the 1980s? So there was pretty much a major spike of warming, 80s, 90s, and into the early 2000s. The point is that the climate has not been stable. It's been variable. And you can see that there's variability, more time-limited variability within greater cycles of change. So the signal, let's say, of the Little Ice Age, that's left a pretty good imprint, because one of the things that happened during the Little Ice Age is that the glaciers that had grown to their largest extent in the entire Holocene built moraines and as a result of that, and made glacial deposits, datable glacial deposits. It showed, one could see that, yeah, these are the biggest the glaciers have gotten, because any previous expansions of the glaciers, say, like even at the onset of the neoglaciation 6,000 years ago, they were overridden by the Little Ice Age glaciers. So in other words, earlier glaciers had expanded, but the Little Ice Age glaciers expanded more. So when they did that, they pretty much obliterated the previous moraines, terminal moraines, and so on. Does that make sense? And so we could see that the Little Ice Age glaciers had grown to the biggest extent that they've been throughout the entire Holocene. So interestingly, if you look at the baselines, in the global warming scenarios, in the climate crisis scenarios, glacier recession is considered one of the main canaries in the coal mine of the impending global warming crisis that we're supposedly heading into. But in reality, you look at it, it's no worse than anything that's happened before, previous to this. I got this just came out. This is an interesting, this just came out 3 days ago. And let's see, what was the source of this? Here's the report. Archaeologists surveyed melting ice patches in Canada and uncovered dozens of ancient artifacts spanning 7,000 years. Then there's photos that show the unique and perishable finds. After 2 winters with low snowpack, researchers set out to survey several melting ice patches in Mount Edziza Provincial Park. Where, you guys know where that is by any chance?
Is this the place where the hikers started going up there? They started finding because
the first one we talked about, that was in an Alpine pass between in the Italian Alps and the Swiss Alps, and then there was a subsequent report from the Norwegian mountains where the glaciers had receded and showed the same thing. I don't have that at either one of those reports at my fingertips, but this is a third. This is maybe Kyle, look up this Edziza Provincial Park. That's so this study was published in the Journal of Field Archaeology. It's in Canada, Mount Edziza, probably Provincial Park. What province?
Northwestern British Columbia.
Oh, okay, Northwestern British Columbia. So it says it's a volcanic landscape that is extremely significant to the Tahltan, one of Canada's Indigenous First Nations. The Tahltan have used the mountains for seasonal hunts for centuries and continue to do so today. Previous scientists had located many vast obsidian quarries and obsidian artifacts in the park, but the nearby ice patches had not been studied as extensively. Researchers said they were intrigued by the possibility of finding perishable ancient artifacts preserved
That's
in
hilarious.
the ice. So when the ice receded, the researchers visited 9 patches and, of course, immediately found 56 perishable artifacts that were mostly things manufactured from wood, birch bark, projectile shafts, walking staffs, animal remains used for stitched hide boots, carved antler and bone tools. So anyways, here's the point. These artifacts, like the ones in Norway and the ones in the Italian Alps, were buried under the ice. With the recession of the ice, now it's apparent that people were occupying that for 7,000 years when there was no ice there. So, yeah, here's the title. Melting ice reveals dozens of 7,000-year-old artifacts in Canada. Not that they lived there for 7,000, but it says here, artifacts spanning 7,000 years. I went to the website. I found the article from the Journal of Field Archaeology. So I have that, but that was just yesterday, so I haven't had a chance to actually read the original article. This is just the report that appeared 3 days ago. But that's interesting. But see, what that does is it supports the idea that the recession of the glaciers that we've seen in the last century is nothing unprecedented. In fact, what it is that the expansion of the Little Ice Age glaciers in the context of the Holocene, that was unprecedented. Anyways, then within that, we have, the history of civilization is entirely contained and encompassed within, at present anyway, within the Holocene. And we're pushing back, let's see, and what's one of the more recent things, maybe I'll pull it up here in a minute. The studies showing, let's see, where were they now? The studies showing that now that have proved definitively, the footprints in New Mexico, have you seen that?
Yes.
Proving definitively that people were walking there 22,000 years ago.
Yes,
Right.
That's awesome.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they now have multiple different dating techniques showing that the original idea, the original dates which they got, that people were worried there was contamination because they were too early.
Yeah,
now they have
the old
multiple
carbon effect, I think.
Yeah, now they've got multiple lines of evidence pointing to this.
Pointing to that date. And now the report came out. I haven't really digested it yet. I just scanned it. The tracks were mostly women and children, right?
Well, there's one, I don't know about that, but there's definitely one famous set of a track of a woman and a child.
Yeah, we talked about that on the show.
Yeah.
And how
I haven't
they
heard
apparently went to an encampment or something. They turned around and went back, and in that interim, there was like some mammoths and things that crossed their track, and some other mega mammals, and
So
that was a really interesting story.
The outgoing track was a female carrying a child, and then occasionally she would stop, and you'd see the child's footprints running around her.
Uh-huh.
Then it would just be her footprints going out, and it was a little over a mile or something, in a very straight line that deviated no more than 1 meter from straight.
Wow.
And then sometime later she came back, but she didn't have the child. Her footprints were not as heavy, not as heavily indentated, and there wasn't as much twisting in the footprints, which suggests she wasn't going as fast. So on her way out with the child, she was like very fastly walking, like as fast as you could walk. And then her return journey was like a normal pace. But while she was gone, a sloth approached her footprints, and a great sloth, and stood up on its hind legs and looked around, then went back down and kept going. And then a mammoth walked by and did not care at all. And then she came back over top. Yeah, her footprints returned over top of their tracks. So like they passed in the rough hour or whatever while she was gone. It's wild. I love it.
It is wild when you start actually imagining that whole scenario and
Yeah.
realizing this is something that happened. This was a
Yeah, and then those
Probably-
footprints, something happened that preserved those footprints forever. They were never trampled on by any other animals or people. So it's like she was the last one to step in those places before they were covered forever until now. That is crazy to me. So how did that happen?
And it dried out, right? It didn't stay wet, or else the prints would have been slowly destroyed. So
then you got to wonder, okay, well, it's almost like she was on a mission. She had this child. She was in a big hurry. She delivered the child to somebody and then came back.
yeah,
And then right after that, something happened. Now, that preserved the tracks.
yeah,
So what was that?
yeah.
Exactly.
What
And
happened?
does it have anything to do with the fact that she was in a hurry?
Yeah, that's
Right?
Yeah, that's what I wonder too. And this is the thing. This crazy thing to me is that the stories said she was walking on the bank of the lake.
yeah.
So if it was the bank of a lake, that kind of tells you how she was able to walk this perfectly straight line. But how are the mammoths and sloths crossing her track? They would have to be walking into the lake.
Well, okay, so is it possible then, that the lake was a watering hole and they're
Very
there
shallow.
they're there drinking water while she's walking by. Then she gets by and then they're done drinking, hydrating, and they get up and they go back across.
Yeah, could be it. Yeah.
Well, because how close was her track
Barefoot.
to the shoreline of this lake?
We don't know. It doesn't. I tried to find this out, but that's the weird thing about it is that the animals don't have a return path. So if she was on the bank of a lake, the animals had to walk into the lake and not return, or out of the lake.
Oh, wait a minute. So the animals crossed going towards the lake, not away from the lake.
I don't know.
We
it
don't
doesn't
know. It
say.
just says they crossed her
They
track.
crossed her track, but if she's walking on the bank, there's only they either have to come out of the water or go into it and not return.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a really shallow lake and they just could walk all the way across. I don't know. It's
Okay, well,
weird.
that would make me think that they were in the water getting a drink and then they left and didn't come back. So,
Yeah.
but wait a minute. Why would you not see their tracks
On the way in.
on the way in?
Yes.
And there's, the stuff that I've read on this says that there's tens of thousands of
Yeah.
print.
I've heard this too. Yeah.
And a lot of them are almost invisible because they're still beneath the surface layer. And the researchers were saying, like, when you go out in the morning when it's exactly the right time and the air temperature is correct and there's a little bit of dew on the ground, then you see all the prints because what you're seeing is like a ghost of the prints that are actually below the surface. And they've done some digging, where they kind of very carefully go in and sort of pull the material of the surface off of the layer that has the print and expose them. But they don't. I think they're not trying. They're trying not to expose too many of them because they degrade pretty quickly once they're.
I'm sure.
The other thing
It's not stone. It's.
Sounds like there must be a Brothers of the Serpent episode already about this.
We have
Yes.
covered this multiple times. Yeah.
the other thing that's interesting too is that there's a famous one of like kids playing in a big footprint, like little children's footprints,
Like they're playing in the puddle
like
of
a
mammoth
puddle
print.
inside a big print. So I don't know. It's just trying to. I just love it. There's something incredibly mysterious about it, and it's like that one set just doesn't make
make a
sense.
story out of these few clues that you get.
Yeah. And then it's like, who were these people and where did they go?
They vanished.
They
forever.
disappeared. That's
This is a screen share of the
yeah.
22,000-year-old footprints in New Mexico. Fossilized human footprints shown at the White Sands National Park in New Mexico. According to a report published in the journal Science, the impressions indicate that early humans were walking across North America around 23,000 years ago.
We have to go there, boys.
Yeah, we need to go see this stuff.
We need to go there and leave our footprints.
Yeah.
Some humans were walking across New Mexico. We had these early humans, and then 23,000 years later, some other humans came and walked. So, okay, there,
This
White
this
Sands
human was
National Park
clearly
in New
wearing
Mexico.
Merrill boots.
Pretty sure those are Birkenstocks.
no, they're obviously they're barefoot.
Yeah, I know. We're talking about if we left print.
If you left footprints, they would be Merrill boots.
Oh,
But anyways, what we got onto this, we got on a little bit of a sidetrack there, but that, yeah. How does this tie into where you were going, the White Sands footprint?
well, just okay. I'm not sure. Oh, well,
23,000
because of
years
the
ago.
fact the White Sands footprint was just in the news. and
What?
Oh yeah.
Only because it had been proposed, like you said, a couple of years ago. It had been proposed, but then there were the skeptics who didn't think that the dating was correct, and now, I mean, what that's doing is pushing the accepted date by mainstream academia back by what, 7,000 years or so.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
What's the climate situation in North America 22 to 23,000 years ago?
Well, I mean, we're getting into the New Mexico wouldn't have been glaciated, but
No.
the late Wisconsin phase of glacial expansion began around 25 to 26, maybe 27,000 years ago. So the glaciers, north would be still growing for another couple of thousand years at least.
So that's what I thought. Is it like right around the late glacial maximum? Is that
Yeah,
sort
it's
of?
pretty much heading into the late glacial maximum, yes.
Wow.
And of course, there would have been lots of megafauna in North America then.
That's the other really cool thing about this is that it utterly destroys the overkill hypothesis. Those
Yeah.
people had been living with the megafauna,
Yeah.
like you said, for thousands of years before the megafauna went extinct.
Right.
And the argument for the overkill
Yeah,
hypothesis
one of the
is
arguments.
that like they show up and it's like these animals never saw humans before and didn't know that they needed to fear them.
Yeah.
So they were just easy to slaughter.
Yeah.
by
Yeah,
the
they
millions.
just stood there like, totally dumb animals and duh.
Well, I mean, I think and the other way that they put it is that it's the arrival of humans that begins the total decline of all the megafauna,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
so like whatever the reasons are, they're trying to say that these animals had survived here for millions of years and we're fine, and then humans show up and they all disappear, and that's part of the overkill. But I mean, those same animals were also in the old world side by side with humans for hundreds of thousands of years, and they
Yep.
weren't being slaughtered. So I don't think it's a good argument, but it is one of the ones that they try to make for the overkill hypothesis in North America.
Right.
And yeah, it doesn't seem to work now because now we have human occupation going back to 22 to 23,000 years at the least.
Yeah. So
And that seems to be that date is the end of the time of these people that left these prints living in that area, because they are gone after that.
Yeah, true, bro. What up, Master Chief? Yeah, I know,
then
man.
this is from the this is directly from the Journal of Field Archaeology. Here it says the article presents the results of archaeological survey of ice patches in the vicinity of the vast
It's a guaranteed
obsidian
reset.
quarries and
Because the guards only start
uh,
reacting
scattered
once he passes
found
away,
near
right?
Goat Mountain and the
As you
Kitsu
know.
Plateau in Mount Ziza Provincial Park. Let's see, ice patch research in North America has been the most intensive in the Yukon, with survey and monitoring conducted
being here.
since 1997. Most of the objects found there are associated with the ancient practice of hunting caribou on the ice patches. As of 2012, at least 207 perishable artifacts from 43 ice patches had been recorded, with associated radiocarbon ages spanning the last 9,000 years.
Yep.
So this work
summer.
has been going on.
What was it?
So
2021.
this, of course, is all Holocene.
2022?
Going last
2021.
9,000 years, I would put as
I was thinking about
2022
that
into the
literally
early
today.
Holocene.
I was like,
And
man,
that would have been
how many
very
years
much into
behind
the
am I,
climatic
like,
optimum.
actually?
So the climatic
I'm like
optimum,
2.5 years behind.
Glaciers were much
But they're
smaller
like, these are like top
than
players.
they had been
I'm like
during the late
2.5 years
Ice Age,
behind players that
even
have been
in fact
playing for
smaller
20
than
years.
they are now.
So how long is that
is
going
what
to take
they-
me? I'm still
we'll
not
put
there.
it this way, even conservatively, they were receded to an extent similar to what they are right now. And in fact, when you have an
It's
ice
so
sheet,
infrequent, this friggin'
a
mainframe though,
glacier
bro.
receding, and then you see that there are these artifacts under there that were left there when there was a preceding era, when there was no ice there. Well, then you got to go, okay, well, how much further up? You know, and then of course the tree line during the warmer periods went up during the climatic optimum and has gone back down again during the little ice age. So that's the other thing, is that when the glaciers are receding now, they're finding remnants of former forests that were growing there during the Holocene when there was no ice. Then the ice came in, destroyed the forest, covered the forest, and so now when it's receding, it's exposing the former existence of the forest. So what is this telling us? I mean, to me, the message here is pretty unmistakable, and that is that, yeah, we're looking at times as warm or even warmer than present. So like here's another I'm going to take from this one. This is very consistent with the studies on the Holocene. This is from 9 years ago, but it's two geologists have been studying radiocarbon dates from peat from the top and base.
Feeling
of
good
the
though, bro.
bog
Like
exposed by
PB is very
recent
potential
retreat of
tonight.
The Rutor
Did you see
Glacier.
the bottom left? This is
Let's see,
Big
where is the
Room
Rutor
Tragedies.
Glacier?
Numbers at 4 already, which is like pretty
I'm
good
sure
already.
will come up at any
I was
some
after
point here, but
that was
this is
after the
similar.
weekend.
This similar kind of
I put in
evidence
maybe
here.
what 20 hours,
The retreat of the Rutor, it's spelled Rutor
4 attempts,
glacier, showed that the glacier front terminated
4 like Big Room
up
like
valley
real
from the
attempts.
bog from
PB attempts.
8,400 until at least 6,000 years
Passing
before
away at the
present.
very last minute frame.
The evidence is consistent with botanical data that point to a high tree line during the interval and to reconstructed mean July temperatures, get this now, at least 4 degrees centigrade warmer than present temperatures.
It's in Italy.
Italy. Okay, so this is, so this is in that, I wonder where in Italy. Is it up near the,
It's one of the biggest in the Aosta Valley, and the 6th biggest glacier in Italy. It is located in the valley of La Tuile, I don't know how to say it. Testa del Rutor is the name of the mountain, in the highest mountain in the region.
okay, that's probably in the same region as the earlier study that I was referring to, which I might be able to pull up on the break. But anyways, did you get that? The evidence is consistent with botanical data that point to a high tree line, higher than now, during the interval, and to reconstructed mean July temperatures at least 4 degrees centigrade warmer than the present temperatures.
Wow.
If the mass
Impossible.
balance history of the glacier is typical of other glaciers in this region, it is likely that average equilibrium line altitudes during the interval of contraction remained above those of the present and well above those of subsequent neoglacial ice advances. So in other words, they're saying that the tree line was well above the current tree line between 6,000 and 8,400 years ago. And temperatures in this
disaster.
particular region were up to 4 degrees warmer in the summer than at present. However,
That's funny.
the current warmth is unprecedented, according
Yes. That's what I was going to say. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but when I was trying to look up neoglaciation earlier to see if I could find some timelines for it. And by the way, they're basically saying the timelines shift depending on where where in the world you're looking at it. 'Cause
to. Yeah.
yeah. But Wikipedia says Neoglaciation has followed the hypsothermal or Holocene climatic optimum, which was the warmest point in the Earth's climate during the current interglacial stage, excluding the global warming-induced temperature increase starting in the 20th century.
Of course they're going to say that because
Yeah.
Wikipedia is completely politically compromised.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But what you were just reading is like evidence for 4 degrees centigrade warmer than now.
Yeah. And that's based upon, the plants that were growing there, the tree line.
Yeah.
I'm sure that if I went in here, we would see that it would give us how much the differential in the tree line here. Yeah, and then he quotes here in the discussion, mountain glaciers are commonly believed to have been less extensive immediately prior to neoglacial ice advances of the past 5 millennia than now. And then he quotes Porter and Denton from 1967, Denton and Parler from 1973, Mayuski and others from 1981, and others. So again, here, the point I think is that, there is a manufactured narrative that is cherry picking the evidence. And, most people who hear about, it's the warmest it's been, like the claim was just made last summer that this is, literally, it was said over mainstream media, this is the warmest it's been in 100,000 years.
Right.
That's ridiculous. It's laughable. But, when you have people that are products of the government education monopoly, they hear that and then they believe it. And, we got to do something. We've got to shut down civilization. Well, here's the thing. If we go along oblivious, sooner or later, nature will do what it's done before. Nature has shut down civilization many times.
Yeah. No, we have to shut down civilization to keep nature from shutting down civilization.
Well, yeah.
That's the goal, right? If we
That's
don't
the
shut
goal.
it down, then nature will shut it down. So we got to shut it down to keep it from being shut down.
Yeah, let's.
Man's ego back again. Stronger than nature.
Yeah, the field evidence and radiocarbon dates from Rutor Glacier indicate that one or more bodies of peat, which now lie in the deglaciated foreland and possibly still beneath the glacier, formed and remained beyond the terminus from at least 8,400 until about 6,000 years before present. Such conditions required that the glacier's equilibrium line stood as high as or higher than it does today for an extended time. That this is not a unique case is demonstrated by fossil remains of Larix and Pinus trees, which recently have been released at the fronts of Gorner, Zermatt, Verpaclet, and Mont Mine or Menet glaciers in the Swiss Alps. So there he's referencing 1, 2, 3, 4 glaciers that have been receding in the Swiss Alps, showing the same thing. They're revealing former trees. So in other words, the trees were growing, the weather got cold, the glacier advanced, encroached over areas that had previously been forested, killed the trees, and then now they're melting back to where they were previously. So again, we're being told over and over, all this stuff that's happening is unprecedented. And then let's see, they dated.
I'm also interested in this, like, what is the state of these tree remains? Like we've talked about this many times, like the advance of the ice is just crushing everything in front of it into dust. But if it's retreating and leaving evidence of trees, then are they talking about tiny wood fragments, or are they finding root systems?
But it said 7 such trees from those 4 glacier forelands is the area in front of the glacier snout.
Okay.
So we can add that to our vocab. The forelands.
Forelands.
The glacier forelands.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
The part
different
that
than
stabs
foreplay.
down into the warm areas.
Yeah.
Okay.
7 such trees, samples of which range in age from about 8,200 to 6,000 years before present. must have lived in stable environments behind or above the present limits of the glaciers. Although the trees are inferred to have been killed and overrun by advancing ice at the times indicated by the radiocarbon dates of the outer wood. Such advances were restricted to the zone inside AD 1973 limit of the ice, as the data provide only maximum possible limits for the glacier expansion. The true magnitude of the advances is unknown. However, they were small enough that the ice front advanced no further than its limit during the recent interval of mid-20th century glacier contraction. The evidence supports...
It doesn't really describe the state of the tree samples they're finding.
So far, no.
Yeah.
The evidence supports the hypothesis that mountain glaciers were in a contracted state for several millennia during the Middle Holocene hypsothermal interval. It is also consistent with results of recent paleoclimatic reconstructions of Europe that, on the basis of pollen data, indicate that mean July temperature in the Western Alps was at least 4 degrees centigrade warmer about 6,000 years before present than it is today. So, interesting stuff.
Well, on that question about the state of the trees, I think in one of the mountain passes, the first one that I heard of, where people were able to finally go up there, they found like a quiver of arrows.
Yeah.
Amazing. ChatGPT is...
The glacier didn't destroy a quiver
Bro.
of arrows. It probably didn't destroy those trees.
Yeah, I'm thinking, there are places, where you have, for example, your accumulation zone.
That roll
where
animation.
There's not going to be a lot of glacier flow. I mean, it'll flow out from
It's like
there.
it's fucking Metroid.
Picture
It's fucking
the snow
Samus.
starts coming, and you're going to have multiple years of snow burying whatever is there. Now you go down slope from there, and and again, the steeper the gradient, the faster the glaciers are going to be moving. So I presume
it's slumping off of the accumulation zone.
Yes.
Yeah. So what's underneath is very well protected.
Yeah.
And I would think too, if those, if it was doing a lot of ripping up and grinding of these trees, then they would be much further down the mountain than they would have started at. So
If they're ripping up the trees.
Yeah.
No, I think they're finding, like I've actually
They're in
seen...
situ.
Yeah, I think that there's actually, in some cases, like stumps
Yeah.
still there. They've been sheared off, but the
That's what I
stumps
was
and the
thinking.
root zones
They're
are still
finding
there.
roots. Yeah.
So there he was referencing the Alps, and then the Rutoi. This is in British Columbia. So we have basically two sides of the world showing the same evidence of a climate that's about 4 degrees centigrade warmer than now. So that's a pretty good indication that we're looking at something that's a warming that's global in extent.
Well,
So,
you wanna take a quick break?
Sure.
We can all think about that. 4 degrees centigrade warmer than now. 8,000
Between
BC?
the date here on this study was 6,000 to 8,400 years ago.
Okay.
So now, I mentioned the cold snap at 8,300, but I've noticed there's up to a century or two variability in the dating of that cold spike. And then with the neoglaciation, the onset of that, I said around 6,000. But again, there's multiple centennial variability, like you said there in reading from Wikipedia, which I would agree with. It was not uniform everywhere.
Yeah.
Some
There was a
places-
general overall climate shift, but it was it affected different regions at different times.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
gentlemen, Cosmographia, the Randall Carlson podcast returns. Continuing on, we got more stuff on this period you've been talking about.
Yeah, well, I'm very, in fact, after meeting you guys 4 years ago, I was already shifting over to like taking a deeper look at the Holocene. And I've continued to do that because now we begin to see, I was primarily looking at these really outsized geological events. So, I mean, at a time I was looking at the Great Mass Extinction episodes that, KT, the Permian Triassic, the late Ordovician, the late Devonian, all of those. Then coming into, the latest catastrophic episode at the end of the last ice age, how that might have affected the long-term, evolution of human culture that goes back to the beginning of humans, which of course is still a question in an area of strong interest. But I've also been now thinking more about what has gone on in the Holocene, more so than I was, a decade or two ago. And what I'm finding, is that there's just this amazing material coming out now that, so what we've been just talking about is Holocene events. We have the climatic optimum. The idea that you might have had periods that were multiple degrees warmer than now. What are the implications of that? And yeah, should we be looking at that in the context of, the concern now is we're, what is it, 1.2 degrees warmer now than the start of the Industrial Revolution, right? So we're still well within the range of natural variability, at least according to a whole bunch of studies that suggest there have been much warmer periods during the Holocene. But the Holocene is, up to this point, if we're talking about civilization, we've got hard evidence now of civilizations that have risen and fallen or come and disappeared, that reigned for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and then they've gone. Now, this is all pretty much within the Holocene, right? I mean, we could almost say that the history of civilization as we currently understand it is pretty much a Holocene phenomenon. And anything back when we get into the Pleistocene, of course, is more speculative and not even considered a plausible scenario by mainstream academia, mainstream archaeologists. So leaving aside the question of civilization that may have existed in the Pleistocene, pre-Younger Dryas, back into the late glacial maximum and beyond, is a whole separate question. Then there's the question of this amazingly rich and complex story of efforts to create civilization as we know it during the Holocene. And even in the Holocene, we discover that it's been enormously variable, and there's a lot of evidence suggesting that, there have been multiple efforts to establish civilization, and they've been interrupted by things that have happened. There's one here. Let me pull this up. This is a report that appeared in the Journal of Archaeological Science. This was in 2011, and it is the 9th century before the Common Era destruction layer at Tel Es Safi Gath. Safi, S-A-F-I, and then it has a forward slash, G-A-T-H. But this was in Israel, okay? A 9th century before Common Era destruction layer, okay? Integrating macro and micro archaeology.
I don't know.
And then this is what they say in their abstract.
This is the name, though.
In multi-period sites are valuable.
And this is the one on YouTube. There's a lot of cosmographias on YouTube.
Across the site and sometimes between sites. Destruction
He's
layers
an interesting guy, yeah.
preserve rich finds that provide insights into site use. Here we use both macro and
Talks about, like,
microarchaeological methods to study a destruction event
asteroids,
from the
the
late
toward meteor
19th
stream and
late
asteroids.
9th century at Tel
Like the meteor stream that we passed through in June,
SAFI.
end of June, and in October, end of
Try to
October.
look this up. So it's at
Fucked up
Tel,
shit, bro. Yeah,
TELL,
I think we talked about it. Yeah,
and then it's small case.
I got
I
it.
think I put an
You got
emote
it?
now.
Yeah,
There's an
let's
emote,
see
the
if I
toward
can
meteor
find
stream emote.
Cool.
It literally
Okay, so
shows
get
the
this.
the
A major
resonance swarm,
conflagration at this specific location resulted in
possibly in the
consolidation of parts of
meteor
roof
belt
construction
around Mars
materials,
of the solar
thus
solar
enabling us to
system.
differentiate between
So
roof
who
walls and
knows
floor
what
materials.
could
We could
potentially
reconstruct the
enter
events
that
which led to the formation
resident
of
swarm?
an approximately 80
You know what I mean?
centimeter thick layer. The base
like
of
a
this layer
shotgun
that
blast.
overlies the floor surface
Twice a
is
year.
a thin, charred, organic material-rich ash layer.
Definitely
As
the
the
solar
clays
system
in this
potential
layer
of the
were not
universe.
altered by heat and the ceramics still have preserved residue, we conclude that the ash was produced elsewhere and was redistributed to this location. However, there are ceramics that are associated with burnt roof sediments that do not have preserved residues. So that's interesting. So the roof was apparently burned extensively.
Pardon me.
Let's see. We identify an unusual bin and associated stone pavement in a corner rich in artifacts, phytoliths, and charred organic material.
Nice. Yeah, he probably
So,
would. That's
okay,
cool. I
and then
don't
it
know.
goes on into the introduction. It
Spotify
says
probably,
that the
man. Probably.
Remains of violent destructions are often pivotal points of archaeological stratigraphic sequences in multi-period complex society sites. Destruction layers in the Levant, at least, are up to a meter or so thick. The strata
found 'em
often
from Joe Rogan.
contains collapsed wall and roof remains, abundant artifacts, a well-defined floor surface, all buried in a generally non-stratified mass of sediment. Destruction layers are thus thought to represent time capsules that
Here's some.
preserve assemblages of material culture characteristic of a particular period and region that enable archaeologists to correlate strata within and between sites. Which is interesting.
Dude,
and
that
valuable. But of
Pro
course, to me,
controller looks
the more
amazing,
important
dude.
and interesting question is, what was
Thank
the
you so
nature
much.
of this destruction
I'm gonna
event?
definitely be playing. Dude,
happened?
it would be pretty frustrated with me playing some GoldenEye, but
So,
I'm
like
definitely
in the
gonna be
southern
playing Switch
Levantine
GoldenEye.
Iron Age, typical
100%.
examples of such destruction layers are at
Sorry, man.
sites such as Lashish,
not to this amount of volume,
Beersheba, and Tel
but just
Halif,
maybe a little bit. Feels good too. Yeah, looks good.
and the sites of
Looks-
Timnah,
it looks like insanely high
Ashkelon,
quality.
and Ekron. The
Wow,
length of
insane.
time required for the formation of a
So
destruction
do you have
layer
to
is
have
not
it plugged
well
in?
documented.
I don't want any input
According to
lag, so you
written
have to have it plugged
sources,
into the Switch when you're playing it.
There were Assyrian
Can it
and
be wireless
Babylonian
too, or you can
campaigns,
charge
but,
it through the cable,
in the Iron Age, is
Wow,
that is
insane.
that what caused the destruction?
like Xbox?
So okay, so that raises the question: was this a natural event, or was it?
Connects to the PC? No, it does not. You can
Yeah, I was
play
gonna
PC
say,
games with it,
did
bro.
somebody burn the
Are you
place
serious
down, or
right
did,
now?
Right.
Dude,
The natural disaster.
thank you,
Right.
man.
So a study of the
You never play
formation
with-
processes
wow.
of the 7th century before
Legend.
the Common Era stratum at Ekron suggested that the sequence of events that brought about the end of the
Wow.
site in 604
Insane.
BC was followed by a
That's
period of
amazing.
abandonment before
Holy
the
shit, dude.
Babylonian destruction.
Thank you so much.
The interpretation
You just
of
use
the
the
destruction
Xbox,
and
yeah, like, I
abandonment
don't-
of Canaanite
I never bought one for the
Hazor
PC.
represents another such case.
I mean, if I was on the PC, I'll always use keyboard or
Okay.
mouse, but
The time span that a
Especially with
destruction
first-person
horizon
shooter, you know?
represents needs to be better understood. This is a major objective.
I do
of
like
this
I do
study.
like Halo.
Here
a
we
lot
examine the case of a
with controller on
short-term
Xbox.
violent event.
It's amazing. It's one of the
The
best.
destruction of Tel Es-Safi Gath,
Yeah,
Israel.
Tel Es Safi.
Tel Es-Safi. Okay.
And then
Unbelievable.
Gath, I think, is a nickname.
Okay,
It's in quotes.
Tel Es-Safi, Israel, dated to the mid-late 9th century before Common Era. And then they assume that it's probably the result of a military campaign, which of course could be. But, that's, I think, an important
I
question.
was looking so much down because I just wanted to see if looking down
But
made a difference, and it
here's the
didn't.
thing. They said that there was an ash layer that
Oh,
looked
had
like the
fun.
ash came from
Just in
somewhere else.
time.
So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's strange.
yeah, how would you explain that according to
There's
a
some really
military?
interesting times now that you could potentially get
Unless it was
on
volcanic or
Switch
something else.
Right.
with Xbox with the
So the
GoldenEye.
approximately 80 centimeter thick distinct destruction layer that characterizes the last Philistine settlement at the site yielded a rich
That could
assemblage of
potentially
artifacts,
temporarily hold a
including
world
hundreds of
record in a
complete
level.
ceramic vessels deposited amongst collapsed architectural features.
That would be cool. On all
let
three
me jump to
consoles,
their-
N64,
some
Xbox,
interesting
and
pictures that we
Switch,
won't
man.
analyze here, but
I'd be
there's
like,
a
I don't know if I'm the
photograph
first
of
player to do all
northeast corner
three,
of the
but
excavation area showing the sediments with blocks
it
of
can't be.
angular
Obviously, I'm not the
chalk
first player to obviously do all three.
which bury various
I
broken
mean-
vessels. Note too that the chalk-containing sediment surface floats to the west.
I now enter that
We'd
category.
have to study this to make
Nice, thanks,
sense
bro.
of it, but we could look at the
It also seemed to be saying that there were ceramics in the ash that came from somewhere else that were not
Yeah.
burned, but that then there were other ceramics associated with the ash from the roof materials that were burned,
okay.
right?
What it
Oh, I
sounded
was
like.
saying.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was saying.
Let's
So
see
there's a
an
bunch
ice-
of guys came in with pots that were on fire, and they threw them and burned the whole place down. I think I've heard a story like that. It's like a guy named Gideon, maybe, just
Yeah.
Cool, bro.
burned down an entire army with pots on fire.
So it says here,
Mystery solved.
an isolated
Crossing
human
Wild.
skull and several
fun.
non-articulated human bones were found at one location under a pile of collapsed building materials.
Okay, I've always wanted to play Harvest
just to the
Moon. I
west
really
of
wanted Harvest
wall
Moon growing up,
123007.
but I never got it for
These bones
N64.
appear to belong to a
I really
person who
wanted it.
died during
But
the
after
initial
playing it
phase of the
now, I'm happy I
destruction
didn't get it.
and was
So all
subsequently
the
buried under the
like, you gotta,
collapsed
like,
walls.
Do all the
Several
annoying shit
additional
of the
human
farming.
skeletons were found on stratum
Oh, it
A3
sucks.
floors
Good.
under the destruction debris in an adjacent
Let's like it
area
very
of
much,
the
yeah.
excavation outside the presently examined area. A concentration of burnt animal bones was found about a meter away from the human skull and also adjacent to the brick wall.
Is it online or is it offline?
All these human and animal bones were clearly lying in the black, fine-grained
Bluetooth.
sediment on the floor.
Wow.
Okay, so something happened, and I'm going to do.
There's gotta be
let's see, I'll
lag
do a
if it's
share screen here,
Bluetooth.
and we'll look
No?
at this one of the wall.
Should be both.
I mean the area, the walls of this.
Cool,
corner.
bro.
Okay, so let me get it lined up. So we've got the photo of the northeast corner of the excavation area showing the sediments with blocks of angular chalk. That's this over here on the left, which bury various broken vessels. Note too that the chalk containing sediments
I knew he'd be stuck
surface
too.
slopes
This is new.
to the west, and the interface with the light brown
Use
roof
it plugged in.
sediment in the lower part of the section
I hear
is
ya.
almost vertical. Let's see. So A,
I
this
wonder.
up here with this black,
It's
this
just,
is
I don't know.
topsoil. So this would have been
It's probably not.
deposited later. B, which is okay. So this
But there
is
might be.
right here. This is B, and that is. Let's see. A is topsoil. B is roof consolidated and unconsolidated sediment. C, which is this over here, is part of the remnants of a wall, the Terra Pise wall. D down here is the upper part of the floor, and E down here is the surface part of the floor. So this must have been an upper part of a floor material that maybe collapsed down. And with these blocks of chalk, I guess they would have been the walls. Let's see, if we go up here, there's other pictures you can see of the area.
That roll
and, like,
animation.
areas. Let's see here. You can see there's let's see. Okay, yeah, look, here's artifacts and things. Like one surface exposed at the beginning of the excavation after the topsoil was removed. The stone mortar and burnt sediment slab are indicated by an arrow and arrowhead,
Come on, man.
respectively. Okay. So something happened here, and I haven't fully digested this report yet. Yeah, first indications that excavation square 89C could be of particular interest. The results are divided into two sections: the layer-by-layer analysis of the destruction horizon, followed by the analysis of macroscopic and microscopic artifacts that relate to the use of the site at this location. So, I'll stop the share there. So that's one event in the Holocene. Then we've got
Roll animation.
you know, the Bronze Age collapse. There's a lot of studies on that. Let's see, here's another very interesting study. This is from 2023. So it's very recent. And the title of the article, which appeared in Earth Science Reviews, is Abrupt Climate Change in Arid Central Asia During the Holocene, a Review. And in their abstract, they say abrupt, unlike the long-term, that is Earth orbital scale climatic trends, abrupt climate changes dominated arid Central Asia during the Holocene, and their origin remains unclear. We present the first comprehensive synthesis of centennial-scale climatic events in this region based on 9 rigorously selected Holocene paleoclimate records. The results show that mega-regional abrupt climate events were consistently recorded during the middle to late Holocene. Strikingly, such mega-regional climate events were rarely indicated in the records before 5.5 thousand years ago. Interestingly, because what they're doing is they're showing up after the neoglaciation climate deterioration.
Oh, the duck.
Okay, so they go on to say, this pattern of mega-regional wet and dry events, although unevenly distributed in time, is ascribed to the intensification and southward movement of the westerlies since the late Middle Holocene, which favored the establishment of climatic teleconnections across the entire region. By comparing climatic events in the arid Central Asia region with classical records of Holocene abrupt climate events, we particularly found that 5 centennial-scale wet events were broadly consistent with North Atlantic cooling events and a global synthesis of cold periods supporting a cold-wet climatic configuration in arid Central Asia. Analysis of the mechanisms responsible for these events suggests that these abrupt events were forced mainly by decreased sea surface temperatures in the North Atlantic and negative phases of the North Atlantic Oscillation. So that's interesting that what we see, and this is consistent with other evidence that shows with the global cooling that occurred in the wake, along with the neoglaciation, you now have a deterioration of climate and more extreme and abrupt events occurring. And in the introduction, they say abrupt climate changes and extreme synoptic events have always significantly affected the human living environment. Extreme synoptic and climatic events, such as flood and droughts, may last from several days to several years. So yeah, and then moreover, abrupt climate changes on multi-decadal to centennial timescales may have been an important factor in the rise and fall of past civilizations, including the classical Maya civilization, social changes in ancient Mesopotamia, and the development of cultures and civilizations in China. So consequently, the documentation of past abrupt climate changes on centennial to decadal timescales has become a focus of paleoclimate research. So yeah, they're looking at deep sea sediment cores, which revealed a cyclicity in ice rafted debris events. Records of glacier advancements and recessions.
That sounded like something you were going to get into. That wasn't that the Miyake events?
That's what I was about to bring up too.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting if some of those indicators in the dendrochronology would line up, like for example with that archaeological site, the
Right.
Telesafi.
Telesafi, yeah. So based in